I was standing in the middle of a glacier field in Iceland when my phone buzzed. Weak signal, freezing wind cutting through 3 layers of gear, and I almost ignored it because honestly, nothing important ever comes through when you're that far off grid. But something told me to check. And yeah, I wish I hadn't. It was a voicemail, short, shaky, from my neighbor down the road. Hey, you might want to call me back. There's, equipment on your property. That was it. No explanation, no urgency in his voice. Just that weird hesitation like someone trying not to get involved. And I remember thinking, okay, maybe someone's clearing brush or fixing the shoreline. Nothing major. I didn't call back right away. I finished my research trip, flew home, drove 2 hours from the airport, and the whole time I had this low hum in my chest, like something wasn't right, and then I pulled into my driveway. And it hit me before I even got out of the truck. Silence. Not peaceful silence. Not that calm lakefront stillness I'd lived with for over a decade. This was empty. Wrong, like something had been erased. I walked past the tree line toward the lake, and I swear my brain didn't process it at first, because where my ice house had stood, there was nothing. Just rubble, broken stone, splintered beams, scattered insulation, like a bomb had gone off. 170 years of history reduced to a pile of debris, and I just stood there, hands on my head, trying to understand how something that solid, that permanent, could just vanish. That ice house wasn't just some old structure. It was a landmark, literally registered, built in the 1850s. Thick stone walls, original insulation packed in by hand. Used back when this entire region depended on harvested lake ice before refrigeration existed. My family had preserved it, maintained it, respected it. I'd spent years making sure it stayed intact, and now it was gone, just gone. So yeah, I made one call. Not to the police, not yet. I called my neighbor, the new one, the guy who had just moved in a few months earlier. His name was Derek Halstead, big money, Seattle tech type, bought the massive lakeside mansion next to mine like it was nothing. First time we met, he seemed polite, too polite. You know, that kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. He'd stopped by while I was giving a small tour of the ice house to a local school group. Asked questions, nodded, acted interested. I told him the history, how it once supplied ice to the entire county. He just kept smiling, like he was already imagining it gone. So I called him, and he picked up on the second ring, casual, relaxed, like we were talking about the weather. I didn't waste time. You demolished my ice house. Silence, then a chuckle. Not nervous, not apologetic, just dismissive. Oh, that thing, he said. Yeah, we thought it was just an old shed. Honestly, it was kind of an eyesore. We had it cleared so the lakefront looks cleaner now. Cleaner. I remember that word hitting me harder than anything else. Cleaner, like 170 years of history was just clutter to him. I told him straight. That structure was on my land, fully documented, protected as a historic site. I had surveys, registry records, everything, and his tone shifted, not to concern, but irritation. Look, he said, our waterfront designer said it was ruining the aesthetic. It's gone now. If you've got a problem, talk to your lawyer. And then he hung up, just like that. No apology, no hesitation, just entitlement. And in that moment, standing there in the dust of what used to be my family's legacy, I realized something. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. Someone looked at something that mattered, something protected, and decided it didn't deserve to exist. And yeah, that's when I called my lawyer and a demolition crew. Now, before I tell you what I did next, let me slow this down for a second, because this is where most people get it completely wrong. And honestly, it's exactly why guys like Derek think they can get away with stuff like this. According to standard procedure, you don't just walk onto someone else's land and tear down a structure, especially not one that's historically registered. There are layers to this: permits, boundary verification, environmental review, sometimes even state-level approval, depending on the classification. And yeah, none of that happened here, not even close. From a legal perspective, what he did wasn't just trespassing. It crossed into property destruction, and because the building had landmark status, that bumps everything up into a completely different category of liability. We're talking enhanced damages, restoration requirements, sometimes even penalties tied to cultural preservation laws. And here's the part people don't realize. When a structure like that is destroyed, courts don't just look at what it was worth, they look at what it costs to. restore it authentically, which can get real expensive, real fast. Now, psychologically, this is a classic pattern. This is a psychological trap wealthy buyers fall into when they move into established areas. They assume ownership equals authority. They see something that doesn't fit their vision, and instead of asking, they erase it, especially when there's a power imbalance, newer money versus generational roots. Derek didn't think he was breaking the law. He thought he was upgrading the neighborhood, and that mindset? That's exactly what gets people in trouble, because the law doesn't care about your aesthetic. It cares about boundaries, ownership, and documented history, and once you cross that line, there's no undoing it. So yeah, once that reality settled in, I didn't yell, I didn't go back over there pounding on his door, none of that movie stuff. I just called my attorney. Different name now, same energy, Marcus Caldwell. Older guy, calm voice, the kind of man who doesn't waste words because he doesn't have to. I told him everything, sent him the photos, the registry documents, the land survey I'd had done back in 2012. And there was this pause on the line. Not confusion, not doubt, just calculation. Then he goes, "All right, don't touch anything. Don't clean up the debris. We're going to use all of it." That's when I knew this wasn't going to be a simple apology and move on situation. Marcus pulled every record tied to that structure. Historic designation, preservation filings, tax records, even old photographs from county archives. And within 48 hours, he had something I didn't even know existed, a valuation report. Not just market value, restoration value. And when he read the number out loud, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so far beyond what Derek probably imagined. $912,000. That's what it would take to reconstruct that ice house. Authentically, using period-correct materials, labor, and preservation standards. And Marcus just said, "Good. Now we have leverage." So we drafted a formal demand, 10 days, pay for full restoration or face immediate legal action. Clean, direct, no threats, just facts. And Derek's response came exactly how you'd expect. Not from him, from some polished law firm with a name that sounded expensive. They argued the structure was structurally compromised, claimed it posed a safety hazard. And then, this is my favorite part, they offered me $50,000 for a historical marker, a plaque, like they were doing me a favor. I remember reading that letter twice just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding it, because that wasn't negotiation, that was disrespect. So Marcus didn't even respond to the offer. He filed immediately, landmark violation, property destruction, trespass, and here's where it got interesting. He also petitioned the court for something called equitable remedy enforcement, which basically means if someone destroys something of value unlawfully, the court can authorize a response that restores balance, not just financially, physically. And yeah, that's where things started to shift. While all this was happening, Derek didn't slow down. Not even a little. In fact, he doubled down. Because about 2 weeks into the legal process, I get a call from my neighbor again, same hesitant tone. "Hey, they're building something. Right where your ice house was." I drove down there immediately, and sure enough, construction crew, fresh lumber, foundation outlines. He was putting up a lakeside cabana on my land on top of what used to be a protected landmark. I walked straight up to him, didn't raise my voice, just asked, "You really think that's your property?" And he didn't even look concerned, just shrugged and said, "My lawyer told me it's fine." That right there, that confidence, that's what sinks people. Because by the time you're that sure of yourself, you've already stopped checking if you're right. So we added it to the case, unauthorized construction on disputed land. And at that point, even Marcus started sounding a little energized, because now it wasn't just past damage, it was ongoing violation. Fast forward about 3 months, hearings, filings, back and forth arguments, and then we're in front of Judge Evelyn Harper. Sharp, no nonsense. The kind of judge who reads everything before you even walk into the courtroom. Derek's side tried every angle, safety concerns, unclear boundaries, good faith misunderstanding. But Marcus just laid it out piece by piece. Survey maps, registry documents, photographic evidence, timestamps, construction permits. Well, lack of permits. And then he presented the valuation, and the room went quiet, because numbers like that don't get ignored. Judge Harper didn't take long. She looked over everything, leaned back slightly, and said, The evidence here is not ambiguous. The structure was located entirely within the plaintiff's property boundaries and was protected under historic preservation statutes. And then she said the line that changed everything. The court authorizes equivalent remedy, including physical removal of defendant structures up to the assessed value, in addition to financial penalties. You could feel the air shift in that room. Derek's lawyer tried to interrupt, tried to argue proportionality, but it was already done. Ruling entered, immediate execution approved, and here's the part nobody expects. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victory. I just felt settled, like something had been corrected. So that same afternoon, I made a call, not to Marcus, to a demolition contractor. Nathan Cole, waterfront specialist, knows exactly how to dismantle structures without damaging surrounding land. I gave him the address, told him we had authorization, and within hours, permits were verified, documentation was filed, and equipment started rolling in. Marcus was there too, documenting everything, making sure every step aligned with the court order. We even notified the local preservation board, just to close every possible loophole. And Derek? He wasn't there, probably thought this was still just paperwork. But the next morning, it became very real. His boathouse, massive structure, custom-built, private docking system, entertainment deck, storage bays, it didn't stand a chance. Nathan's crew worked with surgical precision. First the upper deck came down, then the support beams, then the docking framework. Everything dismantled in sections, no chaos, no shortcuts, just methodical removal, and over the next 3 days, piece by piece, it disappeared. Not damaged, not partially taken apart, gone, completely leveled, foundation broken into sections and removed like it had never been there. And on the 3rd day, just as the final debris was being cleared, Derek and his wife finally showed up, and I'll never forget his face, because that confidence, that certainty he had before, it was gone, replaced by something else, shock, anger, maybe even fear. He started yelling immediately, talking about property destruction, investment loss, legal consequences, throwing around words like international litigation. And I just stood there, waited for him to finish, then handed him a copy of the court order, along with Marcus's card, and said, "The court valued your structure at $912,000. Same as mine. This is the equivalent remedy you authorized when you ignored the law." He didn't take it well, not even close. But at that point, it didn't matter, because the law had already made its decision, and all we did was follow it. So yeah, that's how it ended. Or at least, that's how people think it ended, because what most folks expect is some clean little moral wrapped in a bow. Bad guy loses, good guy wins, justice served. But real life doesn't feel like that. Not even close. Because when everything was over, when the dust settled, literally, I went back to that empty patch of land where my ice house used to stand, and it still wasn't there. The court ruling didn't bring it back. The demolition didn't undo what was lost. And that's the part nobody talks about. You can win legally and still feel like something's missing. The lesson here is, ownership isn't just about what's written on paper. It's about responsibility and respect, especially when you're dealing with something that existed long before you showed up. Derek saw land. I saw history, and that difference in perspective, that's where everything started to break. Now, according to standard procedure, situations like this are exactly why property boundaries, surveys, and preservation records exist, not as paperwork to file away, but as protection against assumptions, because assumptions are expensive, and in Derek's case, they cost him over $1 million when you add legal fees, penalties, and the structure he lost. But money wasn't really the issue here. It was control. From a legal perspective, what happened to him is actually pretty straightforward. You violate property rights, especially with documented protections involved, and the court has every right to enforce restoration, or its equivalent, and equivalent doesn't always mean writing a check. Sometimes it means losing something of equal value, something tangible, something you can't ignore. And yeah, that hits different. But let's talk about the deeper layer, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. This is a psychological trap. The belief that if you can't afford something, you can define it, reshape it, improve it, and that mindset shows up everywhere. HOA disputes, zoning conflicts, neighborhood tensions, people come in with a vision, and anything that doesn't match it becomes a problem to solve, instead of something to understand. Derek didn't think he was the villain. In his mind, he was upgrading the waterfront, increasing property value, making things better. And that's the dangerous part, because when you convince yourself you're improving something, you stop asking for permission, you stop checking boundaries, you stop listening. And that's usually the moment things go sideways. Now here's something I want you to think about. If I had taken that $50,000 offer, if I had just accepted the loss and moved on, none of this would have happened. No court case, no demolition, no headlines, and honestly, life would have been quieter, easier, but it also would have set a precedent, not just for me, but for everyone around that lake. That history can be erased if someone with enough money decides it doesn't belong, and I wasn't okay with that. Not even a little. So yeah, I pushed back. Not out of revenge, but out of principle. And there's a difference. Revenge is emotional, loud, impulsive. Principle is slower, colder. It waits, it builds a case, and when it finally moves, it doesn't miss. And that's exactly what happened here. Now, do I think Derek learned anything from all this? Honestly, I don't know. People like that don't usually change overnight. But I can tell you this. He checks his property lines now, real carefully, and sometimes that's the only lesson the world gives you, not understanding, just consequence. So if you're watching this and thinking, yeah, but I'd never do something like that, maybe not, but you might still run into someone who would. And when you do, remember this, document everything, know your boundaries, literally and legally, and don't let someone else's version of better override what's rightfully yours. Because once something's gone, truly gone, no amount of money or court orders can bring it back exactly the way it was. And that's the part that sticks with you long after the case is closed. Now I'm curious, what would you have done? Would you have taken the money and walked away, or gone all the way like I did? Let me know. And if you want more stories like this, real situations, real consequences, go ahead and subscribe. Because trust me, this kind of thing happens a lot more than people think.